No. 35 Kobashigawa. General Pav. Hurry the hell up. Don't you dare forget those briefcases, you damn imbecile. Yes, sir. Deep within a highly secured mansion on the outskirts of Kyoto was a group of people rushing within a large office. They were all dressed in suits while they moved with haste to collect, pack, organize, and secure several documents, expensive items, and stacks of money. Sitting in a chair with an annoyed expression was a large man dressed in an expensive black and blue three-piece suit. He had 4 pairs of eyes, all of which were a different color. His brushed back black hair was sleek and shiny, while a well-kept mustache sat over his lip. He was tapping his fingers on the armrest of a ludicrously expensive gold and red padded chair. Kobashigawa-san. Stepping into the frantic room was a beautiful woman with neon violet hair. She was dressed in a skin-tight hero suit that accentuated all her natural curves. A short black cape hung from the woman's shoulder while her black high heels tapped along the shiny quartz flooring. Relax. Nothing will go wrong while I'm around. The woman, Shimmer, otherwise known as Amada Kiyomi, was known by the public as Japan's number 25 ranked pro hero. She was one of the country's rising stars with an impressive quirk called shimmering energy. Shimmering energy allowed Shimmer to use the energy around her as a weapon to use in any way she deemed fit. By bringing out the natural power within nearby technologies, vehicles, electrical cables, or even the sun above her, Shimmer could manifest that energy into powerful beams of pure energy to launch at her targets. However, despite her growing fame and powerful quirk, Shimmer was a hungry, insatiable, opportunistic person who would take whatever she thought would benefit her. Being a hero was just a means to an end for her. She didn't even care about the people she saved. They were all just a way for her to earn more money. So when she was offered 150 million yen to protect a paramount crime lord, she jumped at the opportunity. Despite knowing all about his past and abhorrent actions. TCH, for your sake. You better be right, Shimmer. Especially at what you're costing me. Kobashigawa growled as he turned away from the woman to glare at a short, nervous woman standing patiently beside him. How long until we're ready to move? Jiga. We almost have everything packed, and your plane will be ready to depart as soon as we arrive at the runway, Kobashigawa-sama. The nervous woman, Kita Kobeni, said while looking down her tablet. It should only be another 10 minutes. Not good enough. Make it 5. Why yes, Kobashigawa-sama. Not bad. Everyone either respects the hell out of you, or they're scared shitless, Shimmer said with a small sultry smile. You sure do live up to your reputation, Kobashigawa-san. Sora Kobashigawa, otherwise known as the dealer of sin, was one of Japan's 3 major crime bosses. He came up from nothing and made a name for himself by doing whatever it took to get to the top. Whether that meant murder, blackmail, arms smuggling, corruption, and human trafficking. All his actions allowed him to achieve the heights of power he now held. He was one of the world's richest men, and his influence spread far beyond his home country of Japan. He was untouchable by the government, police, and even the pro-heroes. His power and status are what allowed him to have such a prosperous and unimpeded career. All that allowed him to enter the Demon King's inner circle, further bolstering his infamy and strength. There wasn't anyone within the underworld that didn't know his name. There wasn't anyone who didn't fear his name. That is, all except that force of nature that has been systematically destroying everything he's built over his entire life over the course of 2 years. His most significant source of income, his human trafficking ring of children with impressive quirks, was destroyed. His dozens of safe houses that kept his vast wealth were all burned to the ground. Money and all. His large army of 2,000 strong quirk users were all slaughtered or crippled to the point he now only had around 200 men at his disposal. Not even his most trusted and loyal business partners wanted anything to do with him for fear of gaining the demon god's attention. That damn bastard, Sukuna, Kobashigawa growled, the armrest under him cracking under his grip. I'll fucking have his head for what he's done. I'll never stop coming after him until I get payback. Did you say? Sukuna. As in the King of Curses Sukuna? Shimmer said in shock, turning an angry look at Kobashigawa. You didn't say that's who was coming after you. Shut up. Kobashigawa yelled, shooting to his full height of 2.5 meters. His 4 eyes shrank into slits as he glared at the shaken hero. I've already paid you your wage, woman. Now you either do your job, or I'll skin you and your entire family line one by one. Is that clear? Crystal. With a huff, Kobashigawa walked away from his chair and began yelling at his staff to quicken their already fast pace. Shit. What did I get myself into? Shimmer mumbled and left the room to head to the mansion's electrical room. Once there, she grabbed a pair of thick electrical cables and begged to absorb the several thousand volts of electricity. As she did so, her violet eyes glowed with power. I'm sure all those rumors I heard of him were all blown out of proportion. I'll just kill Sukuna and be done with this dumb job. Shimmer said with a smile. Yeah, this'll be a walk in the park. XXX. General Pav. Hamiko and Twice sat on Sukuna's Shikigami, new, as it flew over the city below them towards their destination. Looking up, Hamiko watched as Sukuna flew above them using what appeared to be mechanical wings that resembled those of a dragonfly. Sukuna was dressed in a black haori with a white kimono and black undershirt that was connected to a black hood that hid his features. On his lower body, tied together with a black belt, were baggy martial arts pants and black martial arts shoes. Around his body and over his shoulder was Zaiko, Sukuna's ever-faithful weapon inventory, while Jello, another Shikigami of his, sat on his other shoulder in a much smaller form. Hamiko herself was dressed in a black-blue uniform with a yellow hood that had cat ears on top. A white and yellow cat mask covered her face to hide her identity, while the mask's eye holes had the lenses of one of the curse tool glasses. Strapped behind her was a blunt sword covered in white tappings and black dots as two knife holsters were strapped around her thighs. Hamiko was a little concerned at the sudden shift in her friend's personality once he was fully changed. He was now more silent and cold, or at least that's how he felt to her. Hamiko was curious to know whether this was due to his current focus or if this was how he normally was whenever he went out at night as the king of curses. Trust Soda, Sukuna, Toga-chan, Jin said as he turned to look at her. You may have been training with us for the past few months, but being out here is different. Yeah. It's scary. Jin was dressed in a heavily modified version of his old suit. Instead of it being a skin-tight latex suit, Jin's new costume was made of a thicker, more reinforced material that offered him greater defense and protection. The areas where his joints were still had the flexibility required for his acrobatics or hand-to-hand skills. Strapped to his back were twin katanas that Soda implemented as an extra layer of offense while Jin's wristband measuring tape tools sat over his wrists. I do trust him. That's never a question. Hamiko said, her hands gripping News feathers tightly. I guess. I'm just not used to this version of him. I see. I get that. But from what Sukuna has told me, this guy he's after is seriously bad news. He's been after this guy for 2 years, and tonight is his chance to end it. Bad news. What did this guy do? He's someone you don't ever want to come across. Ever. Jin said, his voice deadly serious. He's one of Japan's most powerful crime lords, and he's the reason so many children go missing. This guy is as close to evil as one can get. Hamiko's eyes grew wide, the weight of what was going on finally settling upon her. Taking a deep breath, she schooled her anxiety and fear. I think I get it now. This is some super serious stuff. Hamiko said, her eyes determined. Still, I'll do whatever it takes to help Sukuna-kun. I owe him everything. Good. Just remember to stick close to me. Jin said as he flexed. We're just back up today. Leave all the heavy lifting to Sukuna. He's pretty strong, you know. Hamiko smiled with a nod, her soft gaze falling back over Sukuna as he flew with the moon above him. Yeah. I know. Despite not ever seeing what Sukuna could truly do, Hamiko absolutely believed what she said. XXX. Shimizu Soda Pav. This is where the human is, Sukuna-sama. Good work, Uraum. I gave Crow Uraum a piece of fruit and dismissed her. Watching her fly away, I turned to Hamiko and Jin as they jumped off new. They gave the Shikigami a few pats before it melted into shadows. They jogged over to me and came to a stop at my side. We peered down at the sizable Western-style mansion below the hill we were on with the trees on our backs. The mansion was nestled between several tall trees hidden away by several large jutting boulders. That it? Jin said as he examined the mansion below. I wonder how much a night here would cost. You think they got an Airbnb? Yeah, this is it. I turned to Himiko and Jin, my voice unintentionally low and cold, causing them to stand straight. You two stay away from Kobashigawa. He's mine. Your role is to hang back and take down his henchmen while I move in. At the first sign of things going south, I want you both to get out of here. Is that clear? You got it. Jin nodded while Himiko looked conflicted. Himiko. I took off my hood and stepped closer to her. My calm eyes gazed into her own reluctant ones. I know you're a skilled fighter. The amount you've learned in those few short months we trained is proof of that. But you're still not ready for what we could face down there. I'm sure Kobashigawa has hired some strong people to keep him safe from me. I just don't want you to get hurt. Either of you. +10 SP. +10 SP. Ah. Okay. Himiko crossed her arms and turned away with a pout. I'll be sure to get out of there at the first sign of trouble. I smiled and patted her head. As I walked away, I missed the light blush that burned on her cheeks. Stopping by the edge of the cliff we were on, I gazed down at the mansion and its surrounding terrain. Jin, who did pick up on Himiko's blush, lifted a small flag with SSXTH on it. He waved it around before tossing it over his shoulder to step beside me, as did Himiko. I reached into Zyko and pulled out Playful Cloud while Jello floated behind me. Himiko pulled out Nanami's blunt sword while Jin whipped out one of his measuring tapes. Okay. Let's begin. Image. Dash. AN. And so, Soda's long 2-year mission will now reach its climax. Hopefully, you all will enjoy the little visual I did for the last scene. It took around the time to write an entire chapter, so it's a bit rough. Depending on how things go, I may or may not make a few more of these for future scenes. Be sure to comment and leave your thoughts. Until next time. 40 comments 0 vote. No. 36 The raid. General Pav. You good for nothings better not have left anything important. Or I swear to God I'll tear all your worthless heads off. Kobashigawa said as he settled into his armored limousine. Sitting in front of him with her legs crossed was Shimmer, while his assistant Kobeni sat to his right. We have everything packed, Kobashigawa-sama. Kobeni said quickly. Kobashigawa grunted and then motioned for his driver to begin moving. Just as Kobashigawa and his several other vehicles were about to depart, everything around them abruptly shook with incredible force. Maximum output. Glacial wall. Rising from the ground around the Western-styled mansion was a tall wall of solid, freezing ice. The wall of ice continued to grow until there was no escape for anyone within the mansion. Jumping out of his limousine, Kobashigawa looked up in shock. His eyes scrutinized the vast wall of pure ice that was impeding his escape. With a growl, the crime lord turned to the right to find the source of all his problems, standing on top of the ice wall. Sukuna. Kobashigawa glared at the king of curses. Beside him were 2 other individuals staring down at them behind their masked visages. Jumping back into his limousine, Kobashigawa turned to his driver. Go. Get us back inside. Yes, sir. The driver behind the wheel slammed his foot on the gas. He then spun his head back to guide the limousine back into the mansion's garage. Shimmer was about to exit the vehicle to confront Sukuna, but Kobashigawa grabbed her arm and stopped her. Not yet. Let my men tire him out. Kobashigawa said as all of his remaining men ran out to confront Sukuna and his 2 cohorts using whatever quirks or weapons they had available. Once he's on his last legs, you'll end his pathetic life. Shimmer frowned but nodded nonetheless. Her eyes locked onto Sukuna's form. All right. XXX. General Pav. Stay close to each other. Take out down the stragglers. Sukuna said as he jumped down the wall of ice with little issue. Himiko and Jin nodded as they followed after him, albeit more slowly. As Himiko and Jin landed, they watched as Sukuna seemingly glitched out of existence before appearing and reappearing all over the mansion's front courtyard, taking down dozens of Kobashigawa's men with ease using his 3-section staff. Dang, Sukuna-kun. Remind me not to get on his bad side. Nah. We can do twice no. 3 times better. Deciding it was time for them to contribute to the cause, Himiko and Jin dashed forward with their respective weapons ready. Who the hell are these 2? I thought the demon god worked alone. Who fucking cares? Kill him. Dodging to the side, Himiko avoided a wide left swing from a large man covered in spikes. Glaring at him from under her mask, she gripped her blunted sword and swung. Remember, Hamiko. This may look like a short, blunt sword that can't cut anything. But this blade is so much more than that. Within this blunted blade is an imbued technique that can land a critical strike if you can land a hit on the 7-to-3 ratio point on your target. I'm going to show you how to find that point. Remembering all of Sukuna's training and teachings, Hamiko's eyes scanned the spiked man's body and settled on a single point directly below his hip. There. Hamiko slashed her blunted weapon directly at her target. Before her very eyes, a flash of black and a long line with 10 lines appeared before her. At the 7-to-3 ratio point of that line, Hamiko saw a red dot explode, a brilliant red. Gah! The man covered in spikes yelled in agony as his body was suddenly flung back with a violent spin. With a loud thud, the man landed on the ground. Hamiko stared at him for a few seconds and sighed in relief as she saw him breathe. Okay, at least now I know how much force to use. She thought before looking down at her weapon with a twinkle in her eye. Seeing that, several of Kobashigawa's men paused and looked at Hamiko with caution. Wow, beneath her mask, a wide, confident grin grew on Hamiko's face. This is going to be fun. Off several feet away, Jin leapt over two rushing men as they tried to tackle him onto the ground. Grabbing his measuring tape, Jin held it out in front of him to stop a downward slice from a katana held by a woman with dark orange hair and horns on her forehead. Twisting his tape around the woman's sword, Jin yanked the blade down, bringing the woman down with her weapon. With her upper body leaning down, she was unprepared for the flying knee strike that impacted her nose, knocking her out. Sota is taking down the ones with the more lethal and powerful quirks. Jin thought as he looked around at the knocked out or dead henchman. Thanks to all his years as a criminal and thief, Jin was capable of distinguishing the strong from the really strong. How thoughtful. Flying in and out of several henchmen was jello. The once small, now large, Shikigami stabbed its sharp tendrils into all those it passed, inflicting them all with a lethal dose of poison that took them all down within a few minutes. Due to the fact no one besides its master and his two companions could see it, the Shikigami had zero issues taking down all of its master's enemies. Watch out, twice. Jumping back, Jin watched as a large bull-like man charged through where he once stood. Looking over to Hamiko, Jin gave her a thumbs up as she landed beside him. Thanks for the heads up, Mystique. I still don't like that name. They turned to the large bull man as he snarled in anger. His large hooves dug the ground below him. You two will die a slow and painful death for disrespecting Kobashigawa-sama. The bull man, or as many know him as Horn Rush, roared. I'll take you two down, and then I'll put an end to Sukuna. Like hell you will, ugly, Hamiko said as she pointed her blade at the man. Jin nodded and scanned their surroundings. Besides Horn Rush, there were around 15 more henchmen staring them down. Reaching up, Jin grabbed his twin katanas and pulled them out of their sheaths. I'm still not too sure about using these yet. Nah. We're practically pros. Jin said as he and Hamiko sprang to the side to avoid another charge from Horn Rush. Sliding to a stop, Jin swiped his sword up to parry a metal bat that tried to bash his head in. With a spinning back kick, Jin knocked back the bat-wielding woman whose body was covered in blue fur. Spinning in place, Jin landed a thin cut on the chest of a man who tried to stab his long, sharp fingers into his stomach. What a cheap move. Attacking a man when his back is turned like a pussy. Several feet away, Hamiko was performing a series of backflips to avoid an upward swipe of Horn Rush's horns. Spinning in midair, Hamiko pulled out one of her extra knives and drove it down into the shoulder of a man with gray skin that was directly below her. The man's singular eye grew wide as he yelled in agony before Hamiko slammed her blunt sword into the side of his head, knocking him out. Standing up, Hamiko watched as Jin wrapped his measuring tape around Horn Rush's head as he rode on his back. Yeehaw! Ride him, cowboy! Get off me, you bastard! From behind, 4 of Kobashigawa's men tried to rush Hamiko's while she was seemingly distracted. Noticing their approach, she reached inside her knife holster's small side compartment to take out a small red pill. Unfortunately for the men who thought they would take down Hamiko with her back turned, she was trained by one of the most skilled hand-to-hand fighters on the planet to be hyper-aware of her surroundings. Nice try. Hamiko yelled as she popped the pill into her mouth. Biting into it, Hamiko felt a swell of strength fill her as she ingested Sukuna's blood. Blood doping. It was a new method for Himiko to quickly gain the physical traits of the person whose blood she ingested using her quick, boosting her strength and speed without having to transform fully. While this method of activating her quirk resulted in her quirk's true potential being dulled down, it still granted her a short burst of some much-needed power, which came in handy in a pinch. Gah. Ah. Fuck. Himiko slid to a stop as she landed 4 perfectly executed strikes with her blunted blade onto her 4 would-be attackers with quick speed. Each of her strikes activating the blade's imbued technique of ratio into her targets. One by one, they all landed from being launched back from her attacks in a heap of mangled or bruised limbs. Breathing in exertion, Himiko looked over to the large hole leading into the mansion. Sukuna-kun. Good luck. XXX. Shimizu Soda Pav. Around this corner. He's behind that wall. Stepping around the corner of the long hallway, the terrified young woman who was crying the whole time pointed at a massive wall made up of what I could only assume was heavily fortified steel. Several pillars and expensive-looking furniture sat all around the wall. Stepping beside the woman, she squealed in fear at me but remained in place. She then pointed at the wall with a trembling finger, her expression seeming to be on the verge of throwing up. There, the woman, Kobeni, whispered. Please don't kill me. I never wanted to do any of this. My parents made me get a. Shut it. I didn't ask for your life story. I muttered before heading towards the wall where Kobashigawa was hiding behind. Now get out of my sight. +10 SP. Why yes. Thank you, Sukuna-sama. Kobeni said as she quickly ran away through the halls where several unconscious or dead, bloodied bodies lay. That woman seemed familiar. With playful cloud in my hands, I walked towards the wall before sensing the air in front of me shoot up with heat. This caused me to immediately dodge to the side as a high-speed beam of energy shot through the wall to my right like a hot knife through butter. +5 SP. Sukuna. A woman with violet hair dressed in a hero costume said as she walked around one of the room's pillars. The king of curses. From the way everyone talks about you, I thought you were this huge 4-armed monster with an extra set of eyes. But seeing you know, I'm a little disappointed. That's a terrifying close guess. The pro-hero, Shimmer. I said while examining the woman. I remembered Shimmer from one of Izuku and Kiko's long conversations over some of Japan's rising heroes during one of their breaks. From what I could recall, Shimmer was capable of shooting high-powered blasts of energy from her hands and mouth. The latter being something she didn't do too often. Her quirk needed a constant supply of external power to work, but seeing as how several arcs of electricity sparked around her, she was fully charged. Glancing at the burning holes in the several walls her attack caused, I couldn't risk getting hit by any of her blasts. That meant getting in close to her was my best move. I couldn't give her the breathing room to launch any more of her energy blasts at me. +5 SP. Oh. The great old demon god knows about little old me. I'm flattered. Shimmer said as she placed a hand over her chest with a mocking smile. I'm impressed you made it this far. Kobashigawa-san had some rather powerful grunts stationed all along his mansion leading here. Even I would have had some problems getting here unscathed. But here you are. Looking pristine. How impressive you are. But is that some sweat I'm seeing on your body? Shimmer then held out a hand towards me. Sparks and arcs of energy ran up her body before coalescing into a concentrated ball in front of her palm. However, this is as far as you go. Now, then, could you do me a favor and die? In a flash, a powerful beam of energy was sent careening towards me. 50 comments 0 vote. No. 37 Sukuna versus Shimmer. I slid under the energy blast above me as it drilled straight through the wall behind me. Rolling to the side, I jumped onto the right wall and created 3 ninja stars with construction. Rearing my arm back, I launched them straight at Shimmer. The hell? Shimmer cancelled her attack and leaned back to avoid the flying projectiles before making a gun shape with her hand. Several bullets of energy were shot at me from her finger, causing me to weave in and out of their trajectory. As one of the energy bullets was about to slice through my head, I swung Playful Cloud into it, causing it to explode into embers of light. Not bad. I can see why you're one of Japan's rising stars. I said as we eyed one another carefully. Still, that won't save you from me. +5 SP. That's so. Shimmer grinned, her body pulsing with energy. What are you going to do? Kill me. Yes. I glitched out of Shimmer's eyesight as I used projection sorcery to close the distance between her and me quickly. The corrupt hero's eyes widened at my seemingly impossible speed, causing her to growl and slam her hands on the ground, sending a large wave of energy down the long hallway, shattering and scorching the entire floor. What an incredibly destructive ability. Canceling my projection sorcery, I leapt over the wave of energy and used Construction's liquid metal to create 3 Wolverine-like claws over my hands. Stabbing them into the wall, I clung horizontally and eyed Shimmer. Anchoring my feet with spikes, I slammed my hand on the wall and activated one of my newest techniques. U-Realm's Ice Formation. This cursed technique allows its user to lower the temperature around themselves to extreme levels of cold. These freezing temperatures allow the user to produce ice and frost at will, which enables them to create multiple sheets of solid ice by simply touching a surface. Frost Flash. Immediately, a wave of sharp ice spread out from my hand, heading towards Shimmer. Seeing this, Shimmer dashed off to the side and swung her arm in a wide arc, releasing a wave of energy that destroyed my ice attack. Now's my chance. Using projection sorcery, I sped off toward Shimmer and appeared right beside her, much to her shock. +5 SP. How are you so fast? Shimmer roared as I swung Playful Cloud into her raised arm. She clenched her teeth in pain before she pointed her arm right at my chest. Spinning my staff around me, I smacked her forearm up, causing her to release her blast above us, striking the ceiling above. Stepping in, I swung my elbow into her left bicep with a vicious swing. Ah! The so-called hero yelled in agony as she hobbled back, holding her ruined bicep. Glaring at me, Shimmer pointed her hand at me and blasted a beam of energy. Due to our close proximity, I barely managed to dodge the beam by leaping back. The top half of my hood was burnt away, revealing my face to Shimmer. +10 SP. Kid. You're telling me the scary demon god is just some snot-nosed kid? Shimmer roared as her injured bicep began to swell an ugly shade of purple. How dare you? How dare you? Easy there, lady. You'll get wrinkles if you keep making that face. I said mockingly. +5 SP. Shimmer raised both of her arms despite her pain, with the bottom of her palms pressed on one another as a large ball of power began to form rapidly. Seeing the rapid buildup of power, my eyes grew wide as I slammed my hands onto the floor. Take this. My ultimate attack. Shimmering Flash. Maximum output. Frost Calm. XXX. General Pav. Hamiko gasped in exhaustion as she leapt back to avoid Horn Rush's overhead swing that shattered the floor where she once stood. Looking over at Jin, she saw him pick himself up from the wall where her horned enemy threw him through. Not good, Hamiko whispered as she ran away from Horn Rush's mad dash. Does this count as the first sign of trouble? Rumble. Hamiko, Jin, and Horn Rush all paused as the mansion's roof exploded in a swell of energy and large pillars of ice. The building shook as all of its windows shattered while ice encompassed everything within several meters of the mansion. Streams of white smoke and steam danced around the building as the tremors finally subsided. Kobashigawa-sama. Horn Rush yelled in worry as he ignored Hamiko and Jin in favor of rushing inside the ruined mansion. Sukuna-kun, Hamiko muttered as she tried to run after the large bull man, only to be stopped by Jin. Jin-kun. No, we need to pull back now. Fuck that. Time for round 5. Jin said as he shook his head. He motioned down at their battered bodies. We can't keep up with that level of power. We won't run, but we can't follow inside. Let's catch our breath and prepare ourselves if anyone runs out. But Hamiko tried to argue, but her sore muscles and injuries burned all around her body. Due to this being her first ever big-time fight, she wasn't used to the strain that it inflicted on her body. Okay. I'm worried about him too, Toga-chan. But I believe in his strength. Jin said as they began falling back to the still-standing shed on the mansion property. Yeah. Sukuna ain't some punk bitch. I bet he's just fine in there. XXX. Shimizu Soda Pav. Fuck, that was close. I threw down my ruined Haori and looked around the ruined mansion around me. The long corridor that made up the hall Shimmer and I once stood in was nothing but ruined chunks of concrete and ice. Looking over my body, I saw that I only had superficial injuries on my body while my clothes were slightly charred. I was lucky enough to erect several layers of CE reinforced ice in front of me at the last second. Otherwise, I could have been blasted away. Placing playful cloud into Zyko, I lifted my hands. Round deer, I said as I summoned a tall, large deer like Shikigami. While it wasn't as big as Sukuna's version, my deer was still a foot taller than me. It then reached over with its snout and touched my extended hand. Soon enough, I felt my body grow warm as Round Deer's RCT healed my wounds. Thanks. Round Deer nodded before melting away into my shadow. I didn't expect her to have that kind of attack, I muttered as I walked towards the damaged reinforced safe room Kobashigawa was within. Shimmer must have put all her remaining energy into that move. Despite the large explosion, the large reinforced steel box had taken the blast like a champ. Even so, the large hole on its roof stood out like a sore thumb. Sukuna. I turned to my left and saw a large, raging, mutant bull man dashing toward me with cold fury in his eyes. The mutant was covered in cuts and bruises as he quickly closed the distance between us. Sighing in annoyance, I made an elephant-like hand sign. Max Elephant. Quickly rising from my shadows, Max Elephant shot out a large wave of water at the raging bull man, causing him to slow down to a stop. He raged at me while he tried to push through the torrents of water. Nu. Flying toward the bull man, Nu screeched and released several thunderbolts down at the bull man, causing him to shout in pain as his body was assaulted with several thousand bolts of electricity that were further amplified by the water surrounding him. I stopped my Shikigami's attacks as the large bull man fell forward onto the ground, his body charred and smoking. Dismissing both of my Shikigami, I made my way over to the large reinforced steel box. Damn, I'm starting to run low on CE. If I run into another strong fighter, I may be in trouble. Reaching the structure, I looked down to see Shimmer propped up against the safe box. Her eyes were glazed as her breaths came out in slow, wet wheezes. Shimmer's body was covered in cuts, burns, ice, and blood. Several parts of her costume were ripped to shreds while her left arm and right leg were nowhere to be seen. Help me. Shimmer wheezed out as her eyes looked up at me. I stared down at her with no emotion rising within me. All I felt was nothing. Kneeling beside her, I stared into her eyes and laid a hand on the top of her head. Did you know? I asked. Did you know what the man you were working for did to all those children he took and sold? +10 SP. Shimmer's eyes slowly grew wide before she closed them. Yes. I said nothing but quickly encased her body in a block of ice. Standing up, I pulled my leg back and shattered the ice block into thousands of shards, leaving no proof that the corrupted hero Shimmer was ever here. I guess I'm a hero killer now. Bang. I flinched and looked down at the small red cartridge sticking out of my right shoulder. Looking over to the man I'd been searching for the past 2 years, I saw a large, victorious grin replace the brief surprise on his expression. The gun that shot me gripped tightly in his hand. Haha. Your ice quirk is gone. Now you're nothing. Wham. +10 SP. I appeared in front of him and punched him so hard he rolled across his ruined mansion. Kobashigawa tumbled on the ground in a heap, the gun he once held now on the floor in front of me. Reaching over to my shoulder, I pulled out the red cartridge bullet and saw the needle covered in some of my blood. This is. Slowly, my eyes grew wide at what this quirk-nullifying bullet meant. Airy. Kobashigawa tried to push himself up as he cradled his shattered bloody nose in his left hand. He turned to me with a vicious glare as he finally stood to his feet. He spat out some blood and grinned at me as he popped his knuckles. Not bad. It seems that even without your quirk, you're still pretty tough. Blurring in front of the crime lord, I landed a vicious punch into his stomach that pushed him off the floor. +5 SP. From there, I moved in and out, landing punch after punch into his stomach, chest, and face without letting him realize he was being attacked. With a front kick, I sent Kobashigawa flying back until his back slammed into his safe box. Gua. +10 SP. Dashing in front of him, Kobashigawa wailed out as my hook punch crashed into the side of his face. Reaching out, I grabbed his jacket and slammed him back into the side of his reinforced steel box before spinning low to land a manji kick on his left cheek, launching across his ruined mansion until he crashed straight through one of the few remaining standing walls. Using projection sorcery, I reappeared in front of him before he could fall and struck a mountain breaker double punch onto his chest. Blood exploded out of his mouth, nose, and eyes as his battered body crashed through the wall behind him. My breathing calmed down as I watched his body slam onto the floor. A pile of expensive paintings beneath him was soon ruined as his blood spread out underneath him. Walking next to him, I bent down and grabbed his hair. Yanking him up, I held his bruised and ruined face close to the red cartridge I had in my fingers. Answer. Where did you get this? I bought it from the Shihasaikai. To take away your quirk. So I could kill you. Is that so? I said before placing the bullet into my pocket. I then held out my hand and created a block of ice in my palm, shocking him. +15 SP. That's impossible. You shouldn't be able to use your quirk. Kobashigawa muttered in despair before I created a very sharp icicle in my hands. He stared at it with fear before I jammed it into his shoulder. Ah. Tell me, where did you buy this bullet? I said with a flat, even tone. Twisting the icicle in his shoulder, the man grunted in pain. I won't ask you twice. XXX. General Pav. He's coming out. Jin said loudly, gaining Himiko and Jello's attention. They all turned to see Sukuna stalk out of the ruins of the mansion, but before they could wave at him, they paused. The stone-cold expression on their friend's face set them all on edge. Pausing, Sukuna looked around at all the unconscious or dead bodies with an impassive glance. He quickly noticed that the only dead bodies lying around were from the goons he and Jello killed. Slowly, a small grin grew on his face as he turned to where Himiko, Jin, and Jello stood floated. Not bad, you too, Sukuna said as he rubbed the back of his head. All the traces of his overpowering negative energy receded back into his body. I'm impressed. Sukuna-kun. Himiko yelled as she ran over to jump into his arms. She snuggled into his chest as Jin walked over. Is it done? Jin asked. Hearing Jin's question, Himiko stepped back, a severe expression on her face. Sukuna frowned and slowly nodded. Yeah, it's done. Sukuna nodded before lifting a small red carriage with a needle on one end. But it's far from over. And with that, Soda's long 2-year hunt has come to an end. Coming next, the Shihasaikai arc. Be sure to leave me plenty of comments. Until next time. 47 comments 0 vote. No. 38 a hero in the making. Midoriya Izuku pushed himself off the ground, determination written on his face as he embarked on his morning jog through the streets of Musudafu. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the city, and he could feel the cool morning breeze against his skin. With each step, he focused on his breathing, body movements, and rhythm. Remember, Izuku. Controlling one's breathing can be the difference between losing and winning. If your breathing is wrong, then your body and mind will be too. Soda said from his spot on Izuku's back as the green-haired boy struggled to do push-ups. As he ran, Izuku reflected on the training and teachings given to him by his friend, Sensei, Shimizu Soda. Smiling at the special memories he and Soda had together caused Izuku to speed up. Despite being quite the sadistic teacher, Soda's training sure showed its results on his body. After all, a 12-kilometer run was a cakewalk for him now. All his training would soon pay off when it helped him secure his spot at UA. Once he got there, his dreams of becoming a hero who saves everyone, just like All Might, would one day become a reality, quirk or no quirk. This thought motivated him as his feet pounded rhythmically against the pavement. He envisioned himself breaking through his current limits, reaching new heights, and rescuing those in need. Yes, Izuku. You can be a hero. Soda said as he placed a hand on Izuku's trembling shoulder. A hero. Of course, you can become a hero. Keiko exclaimed with a fist pump from where they sat on the grass. That's right. I can be a hero. I just have to work twice 4 times harder than everyone else. Izuku said as he was all but sprinting now. He wasn't even aware he left his own city. Pushing himself even faster, Izuku finally began to feel his legs burning, but he embraced the discomfort. This was more than just a jog. It was a step toward his dreams. A demonstration of his relentless heroic spirit. He kept running, fueled by hope and determination, ready to face whatever obstacles awaited him on his path to heroism. Ha! Look how pathetic he is. Right. A guy with a villainous quirk like him wants to train to be a hero. What a joke. Izuku's legs slammed themselves on the ground, causing his shoes to skid along the sidewalk. Coming to a stop, the green-haired boy turned his head over to where he heard the voices. Suddenly, a loud thud followed by a cough echoed out from a nearby alleyway. Walking closer, Izuku leaned his head around the corner. Standing over a downed purple-haired boy who seemed to be lacking some sleep were two boys around Izuku's age dressed in tracksuits. The boy on the left had combed back dark red hair, while the other had short teal-colored hair. Izuku felt his muscles twitch as the teal-haired boy reared his leg back, ready to strike the downed purple-haired boy. Stop that! Izuku yelled, dashing into the alleyway. Leave him alone. What the hell? Get lost. The dark red-haired boy, Azuma, growled out. His eyes glared at Izuku. This doesn't have anything to do with you. What are you doing to him? Izuku ignored Azuma's comment and stepped closer to the three. The teal-haired boy, Ito, raised a brow at Izuku and looked down at the boy, holding his stomach in pain. The purple-haired boy, Shinso Hitoshi, looked over at Izuku in confusion. The green-haired boy stopped a few feet away, his equally green eyes looking down at him with concern. This guy. He your friend or something? Ito asked while pointing at Hitoshi, who sat up against the brick wall behind him. His eyes stared at Izuku incredulously. Izuku frowned and turned to Hitoshi, once again ignoring the two boys, further agitating them. Shinso frowned and turned to Izuku. Who the hell are you? I don't need your help. Hitoshi said as he tried to stand, but Ito knocked him back down. Stay down where you belong, you villain. Stop that. Izuku said, his body moving before his mind could think. Ito grinned at the challenge and swung his right leg to kick Izuku's side. Raising his leg, Izuku shin-checked Ito, causing the teal-haired boy to wince. Stepping in, Izuku sent two open palm strikes onto Ito's chest. Coughing, the teal-haired boy stumbled back before he received a front kick from Izuku, knocking him on his back. What the hell? Azuma muttered before he activated his quirk in his panic. Azuma's quirk, tongue tape, allowed him to shoot out his tongue 5 meters at his target with around 200 newtons of force. It's so slow. Izuku thought as he weaved under the tongue. Or am I that fast? Due to the boy's open use of his quirk, Izuku no longer had the need to hold back to just open palm strikes. Lifting his fists in front of his chin, Izuku dashed into Azuma's personal space and struck the boy with a solid right hook into the side of his head. Izuku watched Azuma fall headfirst to the floor before grabbing the boy's shirt, preventing him from falling headfirst onto the concrete. Ah. I didn't mean, Izuku muttered and turned to look at Ito, who quickly stood up and ran away. Why you freak? No, wait. What about your friend? Izuku lowered Azuma onto the floor as Ito left the alley. Scratching his head, Izuku looked over at Hitoshi, who was staring at Izuku wide-eyed. Smiling awkwardly, Izuku stepped forward and held a helpful hand out. Are you okay? They didn't hurt you too much, did they? No. I mean, yeah. I'm fine, Hitoshi said as he snapped out of his stupor, numbly accepting Izuku's help. How did you do that? Do you have some sort of speed quirk or something? Speed quirk? Izuku asked with a tilt of his head. No, nothing like that. I'm actually quirkless. Ah. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you. Hitoshi stood in surprise at the apparently quirkless kid who was capable of doing something so amazing. Something he couldn't do despite having a quirk. Sure, with his quirk, brainwashing, he could put someone in a state where they were forced to obey whatever he commands. Hitoshi could have easily stopped his attackers if he had activated his quirk. But if he did do that, then he'd just be proving all those who called him a villain in the making correct. I'm Shinso Hitoshi, it's nice to meet you, too. XXX. General Pav. What the hell? Coming to a stop, a yellow-skinned police officer looked up at what could be called an impressive ice sculpture, were it not for the fact that it was a gruesome display of violence. A man was propped up in midair by a long spike made of ice. The spike holding the man was skewered straight through his crotch area and extended all the way upwards through his midsection and exiting out of his mouth. Dozens of spikes of ice were jutting out of his body as if he were a human pincushion, each of which was covered with frozen blood. What could have done this? The yellow-skinned police officer muttered. A monster. Jumping in fear, the officer spun to see Japan's number 2 hero, Todoroki Enji, otherwise known as Endeavor. Endeavor is a tall, sturdily built man with a very muscular physique. He has short crimson hair, which he wears spiked up around his head, and sharp turquoise eyes. His beard and mustache were made up of dancing flames, showing off his incredible control over his quirk. His hero costume is comprised of a tight, navy turquoise bodysuit, with flames streaming across his chest, upper torso, arms, and, most prominently, his shoulders. Flames danced around his eyes, working like a makeshift mask. He also wore tall boots that appeared to be either made of fire themselves or constantly left alight, as only their soles and laces were visible around the flames. He sports white bracers on his lower arms, styled in a cage pattern. Around his waist was a blue belt with a pouch on either side. Scanning the area, Endeavor took in the sight of the large ruined mansion and all the blocks of ice covering the ground and destroyed structures. Dozens of officers and a few heroes moved around to try and render aid to the survivors, which seemed to be made up of several hired criminals and hired mercenaries. Ignoring the officer, Endeavor walked up to the gruesome ice sculpture and placed a hand on its base. Gradually, the sculpture melted into a large puddle of water, causing the brutalized corpse to fall to the ground. Looking down at the body's face, the number 2 hero frowned. "Can't say you didn't get what you deserved," Endeavor said. "That's not a very heroic thing to say, now is it?" Turning his head, Endeavor watched as a blonde-haired man with large red wings descended from the sky. Hawks. Hawks or Takami Keigo's hero costume resembled that of an aviator's uniform. He wears a black shirt with a wavy golden pattern, over which he has a modified tan jacket with a high collar and slits over his shoulders to accommodate his wings. The insides and cuffs of the sleeves are lined with white fur and black gloves. He has a red square-shaped lobe piercing in each ear. A rounded, yellow-tinted visor sat over his eyes to protect them from the harsh winds or dust whenever he took flight. Endeavor, Hawks smiled slightly before a frown grew on his face at the sight of the body. "It is him. Kobashigawa." Endeavor said nothing to the young hero, only responding with a slight nod of his head. Looking over to a nearby group of medics, Endeavor waved them over. The 4 medics rushed in but froze in fear, disgust, and shock at the sight of the mangled man below. Wordlessly, they got to work at gathering the corpses to place on the designated pile near the entrance of the mansion where several other bodies lay. "So, any ideas on who could have done this?" Hawks asked as he followed after Endeavor. "I think you already know." "Yeah. I talked to a few of the survivors, well, at least the ones who weren't scared into silence. This was all the work of our good friend Sukuna." Hawks frowned as he rubbed the side of his head. "It seems we need to change his quirk description to some sort of ice quirk. A powerful ice quirk." Mirko said Sukuna's quirk was some sort of telekinesis ability. "This contradicts that." Endeavor kneeled down and pressed a hand on the ground. With careful control, he began to melt the ice all around the mansion, allowing the police, medics, and heroes to work unimpeded. "I'm starting to think that Sukuna has more than one quirk." "More than one quirk?" Hawks frowned. "That can't be. Some of the witnesses said that Sukuna didn't come alone. He brought help this time." But even so, they didn't mention anything about Sukuna's allies using any ice quirk. If Sukuna does indeed have more than one meta ability, this could only mean one thing. "I'm surprised." Endeavor stood up and turned to Hawks with a careful and suspicious expression. "For someone your age, you seem to know about that man." Hawks nodded and looked around at the ruined mansion. Walls were toppled over, furniture was crushed and torn to shreds, the roof was nowhere to be seen, and the floors were burned and smashed. "I do," Hawks admitted. "Call it a job requirement." "I see," Endeavor replied, not too interested. Regardless, the possibility that Sukuna could have more than one quirk places him on a completely new level of danger. He needs to be taken down. Immediately. He can't be allowed to do as he pleases any longer. "Does that mean you're joining the task force?" Hawks questioned. "No, I will be leading my own task force comprised of myself and my sidekicks. If Sukuna is as strong as I suspect he is, I should be the only one capable of taking him down," Endeavor said before he began walking off. "There's nothing more to do here. I'll leave the rest to you." Hawks smiled awkwardly at his idol and waved goodbye. As he watched Endeavor finally leave the premises, Hawks looked around with a sigh. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and dialed a very familiar contact. The Hero Public Safety Commission chairman. Report, Hawks. A low, calm voice spoke from the other line. The situation regarding Sukuna has changed. Hawks spoke into his phone, and his once lax expression turned serious. He's much stronger than we initially thought. I believe he might be connected to that man. Very well. We'll proceed with Plan C then. So you'll be sending in my senpai? Hawks asked as he used his feathers to help the first responders. A long silence was shared between him and the chairman. Yes, we can't risk Sukuna's existence reaching the public and disturbing the peace, we're sending in Nagant. An. As I was about to post chapter 38, it seemed that I accidentally deleted the last 3 chapters by mistake. X_X greater than I thought I was on the drafts tab and accidentally nuked them. My bad. They're back up now, though. While I'm not too sure when exactly Nagant got arrested for killing the HPSC chairman in the original timeline, I don't think it was that long from the start of canon going off how long her hair was when she escaped Tartarus. So, hopefully my inclusion of her makes sense. Anyways, let me know what you thought of this chapter. Until next time. 48 comments 0 vote. No. 39 combat training. Images changed one after another in rapid succession. My sight trailed the broad city skylines of Kyoto before it suddenly changed to a small shopping center within Tokyo. My vision changed again to a run-down residential area before moving on to the bustling city streets of Shibuya. With each change of scenery, I felt the growing headache hurt even more. Despite the pain, I continued switching between the dozens upon dozens of viewpoints. All of this was in an effort to find any plague mask-wearing individuals or a small little girl. Soda. 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 +5 SP. I was snapped out of my shared sight with my crows by a very annoyed May. She had her hands on her hips while she looked at me with narrowed eyes. Her sharp expression soon gave way to concern as she tilted her head in worry. Are you okay? You seem distracted. I'm fine. I was just lost in my thoughts, I said before looking down at the fold-up table where 2 armored arms rested. Beside them was a small chest plate and a backpack where slim, but large batteries sat within. Where are we at? Due to the subject being changed back to her inventions, May grinned and motioned to the nearby laptop that was connected to the arms. All the final touches are done. We just need you to finish programming the changes to your code, and we can get started testing my baby. Right. I'll get to that. +5 SP. Walking up to the laptop, I began to type away several new lines of code while also changing some of my past work. As I worked, I looked up to see the large quirk testing room I had rented out for Mei, Izuku, Keiko, Hamiko, and my uncle Jin. The room itself was meant for those who wanted to use or train their quirks within relative safety and to avoid getting in trouble for illegal quirk usage in a public space. Over the past few weeks of searching for Eri, I had decided I was sick of having to keep up the charade of being an orphan and having to send a clone in my place to the orphanage. With careful planning and some expensive forged documents, I had Hamiko transform into Jin and adopt me from the orphanage. This was mostly due to her being able to maintain a professional demeanor longer than Jin. The forged documents I had bought from a guy the first no gave Jin an entirely new life with no history of any of his past crimes. On Hamiko's suggestion, Jin was also my estranged uncle, who had a falling out with my father, causing the news of my parents' death not reaching him until very recently. In order to make it up to his brother, Jin had walked into the orphanage and promptly adopted me. The caretakers and director looked a little too relieved that I was finally leaving. Things got a little more complicated when I told Keiko about Jin. She had rained several questions on the man when I finally introduced him to her. Apparently, Keiko didn't appreciate the fact that my uncle had left me alone in the orphanage for so many years due to the dispute between him and my father. Jin, the actual Jin, was constantly on his toes around Keiko, but he did rather well sticking to the story the 3 of us came up with. Even after I told her I didn't hold Jin's absence against him, Keiko still gave him the cold shoulder from time to time while clinging to me. Glancing up from the laptop, I watched the 4 of my friends chatting about something I couldn't quite hear. Jin was wearing a black and white mask that resembled his original one but with enough changes that they couldn't be mistaken as one and the same. We excused this away by saying Jin was in a terrible accident that left his face scarred and sensitive to the air. Thankfully, I had some sickeningly nice and understanding friends who accepted our excuse. All right. All ready, I told May, who bounced with excitement. She then called everyone over, causing them to all approach the table where the armored arms and chest plate rested. It's not very cute, Hamiko muttered as she reached out to touch the arms. Jin walked up behind her and peered down at the armored arms as Hamiko played with their fingers. How neat. Can they blast energy beams out of their palms? Jin asked as he and Hamiko played thumb wars with the arms. It's amazing, Hatsume-san, Soda-san. Izuku said with excitement in his eyes as he looked over the support gear May and I worked on for him. Can this really help me become a hero? Sure can. May walked around the table, pushing past Keiko, Hamiko, and Jin. She grabbed Izuku's wrist and all but yanked him over. Wordlessly, I began strapping the chest plate and armored arms onto him as May adjusted the straps over Izuku's limbs. Wow. These really are amazing. Keiko walked over to watch as May and I finished putting the support gear on Izuku. So with this, Izuku-kun will be able to better keep up with everyone else, right? Exactly. Not exactly, I said, cutting off May's high energy. +10 SP. She walked over to me and rubbed the top of her head on the bottom of my chin with a pout. This gear won't be able to keep up with those who have a good handle on their quirks. At least, not yet. May had some earlier designs we worked off from, but we need to test out how these arms perform first before improving them. What Debbie Downer said. May then unplugged the cables that connected the arms to the laptop. However, once we test these babies, I'll be able to vastly improve them with the data we collect from their performance today. So, are you guys going to do a bunch of boring tests then? How lame. Hamiko sighed and took a seat on one of the fold-out chairs beside the table. I don't know, it could be fun. I wanna go home. Jin said as he took a seat next to Hamiko. Nah, nothing like that, I said while taking off my jacket. I walked out into the center of the training ground and rolled my shoulders. We're going to do something more practical. Combat training. Keiko, Izuku, get over here. Today, you two will be working together to take me down. +5 SP. +10 SP. What? Keiko asked in surprise. But that isn't fair. With the added arms, Izuku-kun may be stronger than you now, Su-chan. Plus, I've gotten a lot stronger with my own quirk. She's right, Soda-san. Isn't this too much? Suddenly, they both blinked in confusion as an oppressive wave of power swept over them. Before they could question it, the mysterious wave vanished. Aren't you two kids getting overconfident? I began to warm up by hopping from foot to foot as I rolled my arms. How about this? If either of you manages to land even a single blow on me, I'll take everyone here on a shopping spree. How's that for incentive? +5 SP. +10 SP. +10 SP. +10 SP. Shopping. Keiko muttered, her eyes wide with excitement. A large, confident smile spread over her face as she ran over in front of me. Okay. Let's do this. Hey-san. Izuku yelled in shock at how quickly his friend changed. Ooh. Things are finally getting interesting. Hamiko grinned and brought out two pampas from somewhere. Go Izuku-kun. Go Keiko-chan. Fight. Fight. I could have sworn you'd be cheering for Soda, Jin mumbled before lifting a flag with a chibi face of myself. You got this, bro. I mean, nephew. Win. Win. It's okay, Izuku, I said while easing into a loose fighting stance. Show me the results of all your years of training. +20 SP. Soda-san, Izuku uttered softly. Taking a deep breath, he slid into his own stance and began to glare at me. Very well. I'll show you what I'm capable of. I grinned at them both and beckoned them on. Let's get this show on the road then. Clap. I backflipped away as a barrier of blue energy swiped past where I once stood. Not bad, Keiko. Right for the throat. +5 SP. I have you to thank for that. Keiko smiled at me and followed after me. Clapping her hands, Keiko unleashed 3 more waves of energy, all of which took on the shapes of fists. I danced around each of them and flipped over a low kick thrown by Izuku. With a glare, he spun around and flicked out 2 snap kicks at my midsection. Grinning, I moved out of range of the first kick before slapping his second kick to the side. Let's see how well the chest plate holds up. With a flick, I punched him on his chest using some minor CE enhancement, causing him to grunt as his body rolled back several meters. +5 SP. +10 SP. Izuku-kun. Keiko yelled as she ran sideways. Clapping her hands, Keiko hopped on a blue disc she conjured below her feet. Gliding across the floor to float in front of Izuku, Keiko pushed her hands in front of her. In a flash of blue, a wide barrier the size of a car rushed at me. From behind the barrier, Izuku leaned down and rushed me, using the barrier as a blind spot. A distraction. Not bad, you too. I leaned to the side to avoid Izuku's flying kick after he used the barrier as a launching pad, resulting in him flying behind me. Seeing their combined attack fail, Keiko clapped her hands again, launching 3 flying pillars of energy at me with a wince. I pushed myself off the ground and reappeared in front of Keiko, surprising her with my speed. Fast. Really? I suppose we have to up your running exercises then. Gay. +5 SP. Reaching out, I grabbed both of her hands and used them as leverage to land a strong donkey kick at Izuku's face from where he tried to land a sneak attack. Using my abdominal strength, I flipped over Keiko and landed behind her with her wrists still in my grasp. Keiko's arms were locked in front of her as she failed to escape me as her back was pressed against me, trapping her. Still too stiff, I pushed her forward and landed a good kick onto her back, sending her stumbling into Izuku. Are you okay, Heize-san? Izuku asked Keiko, who quickly nodded as they turned to me. I grinned at them as I slid my hands into my pockets. Don't tell me that's all you two got. Not even close. Izuku and Keiko both said in unison. Turning to one another, they nodded before rushing forward. Izuku reached me first and threw out a right punch at my head. I easily dodged it and moved back to avoid a left punch. From there, our fight turned into a dance where he tried to use every combo he had in his arsenal. Unlike before, his speed was much greater, probably around a 5% boost, thanks to the armored arms. As we moved, I noticed that he was purposely keeping himself in my direct line of sight. So that's how it is. Now, Izuku-kun. Right. I smiled and remained in place as Izuku flipped away just as Keiko sent a very large and very fast barrier right at me. It was the size of a small house, but it wasn't all that thick. It seemed that Keiko had exchanged the durability and strength of the barrier in favor of increasing its size and speed. Not bad. Crack. Standing beside Keiko, Izuku watched the loud plum of dust from Keiko's attack slowly begin to settle. Keiko's breathing was quick, and sweat covered her face. She then fell onto her knees as all her remaining strength left her. Did that get him? Izuku muttered, his posture stiff. I don't know, maybe. I said as I peered into the plum of dust. Do you see him? +20 SP. +10 SP. Both Keiko and Izuku spun to see me standing in between them. Before he could move, I spun on my left foot and kicked Izuku's exposed stomach with a strong back kick. The boy gasped as he was launched back, his body curling up in pain. Keiko was about to yell out his name, but I grabbed the top of her head and slammed her onto the ground. Seeing both of them down for the count, I turned to an incredibly happy Mei. Hamiko had a pout on her face due to the loss of a free shopping trip, but she didn't seem surprised at my win. Jin was giving me a standing ovation while yelling bravo here and there. How's that? You get any good data? Tons. XXX. Oh. How about we switch out the baby's current flex ring for one that allows a wider range of motion? That might work. But it might also rip Izuku's arms off. That's okay. We'll just make Midoriya-kun some new arms. I smiled at Mei as we made our way back to her house. Izuku and Keiko both groggily went home together while Hamiko wanted to go buy some ingredients for tonight's dinner. Jin was promoted to bag carrier by her and was promptly dragged with her towards the store. That left Mei and me to carry all of our equipment back to her home. Normally, this would take more people due to the weight of the gear, but I had no issues carrying it. Over my shoulder was a large metal case where the damaged arms and chest plate sat while the fold-up table was strapped to my back. May walked beside me with a large backpack full of her tools and laptop as she scribbled away new designs and ideas on her handy notepad. Huh. I mumbled as May suddenly held my free left hand. She wasn't paying attention to me as we continued to walk down the city streets. What's the matter, May? What do you mean? May asked, genuinely confused. Well, you're holding my hand, I said, raising up our joined hands. She then blinked and made a soft, noise. I don't know, I guess I just wanted to hold it, she said as her fingers tightened around my own. Do you not want to? We continued walking, my eyes focused on her face. Feeling my gaze, May's cheeks slowly began to redden. I then shrugged and looked back up. Is she? No. This is May we're talking about. She's probably worried she might wander off, so she's using me as a guide or something. No, it's fine. +20 SP. I adjusted the metal case over my shoulder and missed the wide smile that grew on May's face, something she wasn't even aware she did. The two of us continued walking hand in hand until we reached her home. Once there, we let each other go and walked inside her house. I greeted both of her parents before placing her baby down into her little work area in her room. Okay. Don't work on these too much, and try and get some sleep, I said while rolling my weary shoulder. May walked up to the case and snapped it open while she brought out her tool bag from her backpack. Don't think I haven't noticed the small bags under your eyes. +10 SP. What's sleep in the face of innovation? May said as she sat on one of the armored arms on her work table. Just as she was about to undo the screws holding the forearm plates down with a screwdriver, I placed a hand over her own, stopping her. I then gave her a stern look that she tried to squirm away from. May. Fine. I'll get some sleep. Happy. +20 SP. Taking my hand away, I gave her a nod with a smile. Yup. That way, you won't blow these or me up accidentally. Again. +10 SP. I said I was sorry. I didn't know that baby #34 was going to blow up during the testing phase. Tell that to my eyebrows. They grew back. AN. I have a quick question. I've noticed several requests for me to add Toga as Soda's other potential partner alongside Hatsume. While this would go against the one-partner agreement I made with everyone, I wanted to see how everyone feels about this now that I have more readers than when I first conducted my original poll. I'm only willing to do one other partner, and with how I have written the story so far, Toga may be the only other love interest I'm willing to add, considering that these two characters are most likely the only ones I can see accepting a polyamorous relationship. I'll be leaving it up to you all. Long live democracy. 1. Yes, add Toga and make it a love triangle. 2. No, keep it as a single pairing with just Hatsume. Happy voting, until next time. 141 comments, 0 vote. No. 40 it never ends. General Pav. What a pain in the ass. Said a man wearing a thick pair of sunglasses despite the night sky. He had brushed back brown hair while he wore a pristine three-piece white suit. The man was sitting in the back of a white SUV as it drove through the streets of Shinjuku. He looked beside him where a young little girl with black hair pulled up into twin tails cried loudly. Her once frilly pink dress was now stained red with blood. Shut the hell up, you damn kid. Mommy. I want my mommy. The girl cried. Only to be silenced once the man smacked her on the cheek. You better learn to follow directions. Otherwise, you'll end up like your mommy. The man said mockingly. He then looked over to his driver. How much longer? Just another 10 minutes, Takakura-san. Nodding, Takakura looked down beside his leg, where a small paper bag containing a few thousand yen was sitting. What a waste of time. That bitch didn't even have enough to cover the drive here, much less pay off her debts to us. He then looked over to the silently crying girl. That means her debt is now yours to pay. You got that, you damn brat. The now orphaned girl said nothing as she tried to press her body against the car door in an attempt to get as far as she could from Takakura. Grinning in amusement, Takakura pulled out his phone and began to scroll through several images. The images were of a middle-aged black-haired woman being punched, cut up, and kicked by two men in suits. The pictures scrolled one after another, each one showing the woman in a worse state than before. The last photo, a selfie of Takakura making a peace sign with the dead woman in the background, could be seen on the phone, causing the man to chuckle in amusement. Huh. The driver said as he squinted his eyes. What's that? Kablam. Without warning, the vehicle in front of them that held his underlings exploded in a ball of flames. Freaking out, Takakura's driver spun the wheel, but their SUV was suddenly launched into the air, spinning through the air before it fell roof down on the road. A loud screeching filled the inside of the vehicle as it slid across the pavement, muffled by the scared yells from within the car. Aguchi. You dumb bastard. What the hell did you do? Takakura yelled in anger as he picked himself up from the roof of the SUV. A large scratch stretched across his forehead to his left cheek, spilling blood down his face. He then looked off to the side and found that the little girl he took was no longer beside him. What? The loud sound of glass shattering stole Takakura's attention as he watched his driver, Aguchi, be grabbed by an arm. With a mighty pull, Aguchi was pulled out of the SUV with a frightened scream. Takakura remained silent as a very bright flash of orange light and a wave of heat struck him. What is this? What's going on? It was then that a charred, smoking skeleton fell down in front of the broken windshield. Takakura looked on in silent horror as he noticed the lone gold tooth on the jaw's central incisor. Exactly where Aguchi had his own. Aguchi. Takakura muttered before the door beside him was ripped clean from its hinges. Before he could react, Takakura's left ankle was grabbed by a powerful vice grip. Gah! He yelled as he was dragged out of the vehicle, his face scraping along the ground where several shards of glass sat scattered. Looking around wildly from his upside-down position, Takakura screamed until a martial arts shoe kicked his teeth in. Shut up, Sukuna muttered before looking down at a phone with a green case. On the case were a pair of bunny ears. Placing the phone in one of his pockets, Sukuna lifted Takakura up, only to drop him on his head, causing the man to cry in pain. Crawling onto his back, Takakura was about to beg for his life when he finally noticed the tattoos on Sukuna's body. It's you, Takakura muttered with dread. Sukuna said nothing as he raised his hand, summoning a ball of fire in front of his palm. Takakura's eyes widened with terror, seeing the burning ball of death. Are you with the Shihasaikai? Me. I'm not with those guys. Takakura said. Unfortunately, that was not the answer the King of Curses was looking for. No, wait. Watching the now burning body with expressionless eyes, Sukuna walked away as the man's screams eventually died down. Stopping mid-step, Sukuna looked around at the dozens of scared observers without a care. Without saying a word, Sukuna leapt away from the scene, leaving behind dozens of scared observers who would all quickly spread what they saw that night. XXX. Shimizu Soda Pav. Photo manipulation, Hasaba Nanako's cursed technique. It was one of the newly added techniques I gained a week ago during a gold tier pull. Not much was known about the technique due to its short appearance during the Shibuya arc in JJK. However, from what was shown of the technique before Sukuna killed Nanako, it appeared to give her the ability to manipulate the subject within any photograph she took. That would have explained how she and Mimiko survived Jago's attack. Its true potential was made clear to me after all of the technique's information was poured into my brain. As I suspected, photo manipulation did give me control over the subjects within the photo I took with the cursed tool that was her phone. Once the photo is taken, I can move, cut out, or even delete anything I take a picture of. However, using this technique requires a lot of CE. Especially the option to delete the subject of my choosing. That was probably what Nanako was planning to do to Sukuna before he killed her. Though, I doubted that would have been enough to kill him. This was the technique that allowed me to remove the girl from the car earlier tonight from the men who murdered her mother. Using the technique had eaten up around 30% of my overall CE. And all I really did was move the girl over to another photo I took, which was the rooftop I was standing on before I attacked the two vehicles. Cutting a subject from the picture would take up 55% of my CE, and deleting something would cost 75%. It was an extremely useful technique in a controlled situation, but the CE it takes up made it a useless technique in actual combat. Even so, it's what allowed me to move the girl from a tight situation. The poor girl was confused and scared of me at first, but after I messed up my hair and removed my tattoos, I comforted her as best as I could before taking her to one of the best orphanages in Japan. The orphanage that I had a heavy hand in molding ever since my actions as Sukuna began. I used around 60% of all the money I took from my escapades to fund the operation. At the same time, I made sure to take a closer look at all of its employees to make sure they did their job well. I even introduced myself to the director in charge of the orphanage. He was suspicious of me at first, but after 2 years of working together, the man now trusted me and my intentions heavily. After explaining the little girl's situation, the director took her with a heavy heart. As I left, the girl had a sad and lifeless expression. Seeing that caused me to regret not being able to save her mother. But I failed to get to them in time. Using construction, I gave the little girl a large rabbit plush toy. She tentatively took the plush before being guided inside by one of the orphanage's caretakers. Taking down Kobashigawa ended up causing more problems than I had hoped. With such a large power gap left behind due to his death, dozens of criminals have come out of hiding to try and fill that gap themselves. All in hopes of becoming one of Japan's newest and cruelest crime lords. Unfortunately for them, I was still here. Damn, I'm starting to sound like Batman. Even so, I had to focus on my primary objective. Find, overhaul and save Eri. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, I scanned the streets below underneath my black hood. Landing on a tall light pole, the people below were unaware I was above them with the light below me. Just as one of the bar-hopping college students was about to look up, I was gone. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of searching and still nothing. I frowned as I scaled the side of a tall apartment building. Reaching the top, I landed in a crouch and leapt toward the building across the street. With a roll, I sprung up and landed on the roof's edge. How frustrating. Some would question why I was so pressed on finding Chisaki and his goon squad. It wasn't because I was interested in fighting or killing him. No, I needed to find Eri and get her away from him. From the snapshots they showed us from the original canon, the poor girl was sliced and pulled to pieces who knows how many times. It was why I had my crows search for her right away ever since I acquired Mei's technique. Much to my annoyance, after so many years of searching high and low, I've yet to find a sign of the Shihasaikai. I just needed Chisaki to slip up once, but the man has been cautious. But knowing that his quirk nullifying bullets were now on the streets, I had to boost my search. I wouldn't let Eri suffer a second longer if I could help it. Something's coming. I blasted off to the side just in time as a high-speed object crashed where I once was.